But after the seasons of lament and being able to process, our stories are so powerful. And when God has brought us through darkness, which he promises to do,
Yes.
we have got to share that.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine Podcast, part 2 with our guest, Molly Huffman. Molly, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not sure how mad I made a handful of people, or if they thought the end of last week's episode was cruel or an unusual punishment. And that was not my heart at all, for us to stop kind of at the low point in the story. But I really do believe what I said last week, that I think so often, sometimes we even read Bible, stories, and we read and we don't realize sometimes that between certain sentences is 3 months or 3 years, or even like in the life of Paul, like there's like a 13-year period where God was preparing him, but like never in the Bible do we is it say from this point was 13 years. We just read it and we go, oh, so it just happens that quick. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen that quick. And Molly shared last time, if you haven't listened to that episode, I want you to go back and listen to part 1. But Molly, over basically less than a decade.
Yeah, about 6 years.
You went through the loss of a parent, a miscarriage, the loss of a born child, and infidelity by your husband in divorce.
Yes.
Which... I don't know I know there's a scale you can go out there with, like the stress of life scale.
I remember seeing it at that time too.
You were overdrawn.
It was high.
At that point. And first and foremost, thank you for trusting us with the story and allowing us to journey with you. I'm excited to continue to hear as the last episode lives on, the feedback we get from people of how God met them in the moment that we left them from episode 1. And where I want to start, Molly, is you got there, and that was I would think the lowest of the low at this point, right?
Yes.
And you had learned the skill and the discipline of lament through that process, so that wasn't new. But then you began to embrace the reality of God pruning and shaping your life. And so let's jump back into the story. And we pick it up. We're now by ourselves. What did God begin to do as you began to kind of climb out of this valley?
So, I got to this apartment, as I said last time, childless, motherless, divorced, in an apartment instead of my home that I loved, and I could sense that God was going to do something, like, okay, we're here. Here's a new start. It's not the one you want. But I had learned a lot along the way. And I knew I was starting to realize there needed to be some pruning in me. And so as an image I like to share with people comes from the book Streams in the Desert. Okay. I read during that time. It's February 19th is the entry. And basically...
Who wrote that book?
Okay, it's 2 letters, like C.W. Kalman or something.
Okay, Streams?
Streams in the Desert.
Streams in the Desert, okay.
It's, I believe, the wife wrote it, but she had to use her husband's name because it's an old...
Okay.
Anyway, it's really good if you're going through a hard time, though. They have updated versions of it, too. And so there is a woman who's walking through a garden, and the garden is just a tangle of weeds, and it hasn't been cared for. And, she's looking at this garden thinking, what in the world, and she herself had been going through a season of suffering where it just seemed like thing after thing after thing, And so I'm reading this thinking, yes, this sounds like me. And it says that she sees the gardener, capital G. And she's like, what is going on with this garden? And, he says, like it's become useless to me. So I've stopped pruning it. I've stopped trimming. I've stopped, caring for it because it has become useless. So I've just let it grow out of control.
Wow.
And he says to her, do you wish for me to leave you alone? And she says, whispers, no. And it was a really powerful reminder to me during that time of, in John, it talks about how the Lord prunes us. He has to cut back the dead things in us, the broken things, in order that new life and new fruit can be produced. And so during that time, the Lord just kept whispering to me, do you trust me with my knife? And that's ultimately the decision that we all get to make.
Wow. So good.
And so I was beginning to really trust him with his knife.
But in that, here's the thing though I love is the story, and obviously you're a sweet, gentle woman. You're telling this story sweetly. But as I'm even just thinking about the way the story was written and the picture there, and knowing how God is, it's like we're talking about trusting him in those moments and trusting him to prune our life and trusting him in his knife. He's not coming in with the massive machete and being like, we're just lopping stuff off. Like, you know what I mean? Here it comes. I mean, to get to the place where when he realizes you're ready for pruning, when you're ready for that, it's not an aggressive, just ripping and tearing, that like, it's an invitation.
It is. I love that word, invitation.
And it's gentle. Hey, and I love that question in that story of like, hey, do you want me to leave you alone? Mm-hmm. Like I will, but your life will remain useless.
Right.
Right. Or we can go to work.
Well, and I can now look back and see I would have never chosen the death of my mom.
Absolutely.
The death of my child.
Right.
No
one's ordering that off the menu.
Right.
Yeah.
And so during the season of lament that we talked about, and as I'm reading scripture and it's coming alive to me in new ways, I realize I was beginning to know God in new and personal ways. I was beginning to understand life is more than just my dreams.
Yes.
And I would not have learned that so powerfully if God, and it's hard, but I dare say even if God wouldn't have given me almost the grace of those losses, because I would have never surrendered those things on my own.
Yeah.
And I learned things about God, about eternity that we really only learn through suffering. Yeah. And so for that, I could be grateful in a way, for this pruning. And so during that time, like we said, God is so gentle with us and he reveals things. And during that time, he started to reveal how my dream of motherhood had been an idol that I white-knuckled at all costs. Wow. I think motherhood, getting married, those things are good things. Yeah, sure. They are gifts from the Lord.
Yeah.
But really the phrase, I know that I have turned it into an idol when I am gripping it so tightly rather than holding it open-handed. Lord, you can do what you want with this.
When I think in at least American Western church culture, we idolize it.
Yes, we do.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So you weren't alone in it,
yes.
But I do think there are single young people, women and men, that may be watching or listening right now, where they may need to take a pause there and say, where's this at in my life? Mm-hmm. Is this an idol? And I think the dangerous things about idols, and I think you can unpack some of this, is when they become our focus, our vision for where God is and what God is, gets very skewed.
Yes. To me, the word that comes to mind is just the ultimate. Like it is the ultimate thing. I have to have this to be fulfilled. And so it was so crazy to me because I felt during this time God was sort of stripping me of this idol. Like, no, Molly, like, you do not have to be married to be fulfilled. I will fulfill you. You do not have to have children. I will fulfill you, you know? And I got to a place, this was even before I moved into the apartment, but when the, genetic test came back and I thought, I remember the day that he invited me to surrender motherhood. And there's a verse, and I wish I could quote where it is, but it's in the Old Testament. And they're talking about do you think that these objects of wood and stone can really fulfill you? And it when we think about it, like, why do we think that anything other than God could? But I did, and so there was an invitation of, after the lament, are you going to keep holding on to this, or can you release it to me and let me do with this what I want to do in your life? And it was crazy, Daron, because I remember being like, okay, I'm ready to release this. And I prayed, all right, Lord, it's yours. My dream of motherhood is yours. And in my mind, I thought, okay, all right, Lord, I can figure this out. You're either going to...
I'm going to lay this down.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what your next step's going to be.
Here are your three options. You are either going to, change my husband's mind and we'll have more biological children, or we will adopt, or you'll change my heart and I will be fine not having children ever. Those were my options. Or maybe my husband would die, but I didn't think he would do that, because I'd already lost my son. So I was like, that's probably not what you're going to do. So
it's like I love it. I totally get it. It's a complete, conditional, it's not even a conditional surrender, but it's like, I don't know what the word I'm trying to figure out, but it's like, yeah, I'm surrendering and then giving you
but here are your options.
Here are your options. This is what you'll probably need to do.
Yeah.
Because if you'll do one of these three, it will make me able to handle the surrender.
Well, they really were the only options to me on the table because, my husband and I had said we were in it to win it, So, so divorce was not an option at that point. But it's so, I have journals from that time and it's just so fascinating to, I surrendered it, and I had these pieces, but God had a whole other piece. And knowing that there was even more pain that was going to come before.
One of the things I talk about in the book, there's a quote in there where I talk about that, we're called to be living sacrifices, right? And so then you're surrendering. I'm a living sacrifice, God. But I said the point is that the problem with living sacrifices is they can crawl off the altar, right?
Yes.
So you lay it down. It's like, Lord, I lay it, I'm like, here's my dream, I'm all yours. Let me get off the altar. Good. It needs to probably be this way, or it needs to be this way. And he is so gracious to just say, it's always that invitation, well, no, I actually have something better actually planned if you would like to actually come and submit to my guidance and what I'm doing in your life.
Yes.
So you even talked about being an idol. And I wonder about this, and I don't want to make it weird, whatever, but do you feel like even seeking that motherhood idol possibly, do you feel like maybe the initial choice to marry your first husband, do you think that was kind of like clouded the judgment there at all?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. I remember, when God whispered, you had made this an idol too. Don't you remember that, that I kept whispering to you, this is not who I have for you.
Wow.
But I was just so focused on, you got to get married in order to have kids. And, I went to a private Christian school, and a lot of my friends were getting married upon graduation, and I was
that MRS
single. Degree,
right?
That's right. And so a lot of this, is Christian culture stuff too.
Yep.
And so it was, I realized that if I could be so honest with myself that that maybe marrying him was not God's best for me.
Wow. But don't you think, Molly, you once again, he's gently inviting you to reveal this truth to you, right? When you understand truth, it sets you free. In this process, what he's really doing is he's setting you up for the resurrection of these dreams. Because if you wouldn't have come to these conclusions, if you wouldn't have let go of these things, if you wouldn't have been able to say, okay, idle, the potential of you repeating the same
100.
mistakes, right?
Yes, 100%. And so it is incredible to think like I would have repeated it if the Lord hadn't gently revealed this to me and taught me this lesson. Because by the time he did this work in my heart, I could see that there in that apartment, I knew that I am God's child, I'm God's daughter, apart from all these other roles, and that he truly is enough. He truly is, like, I can trust him and what his plan is, and I don't have to be afraid. I don't need anything else. And that took a long time.
Yeah.
But it then allowed me to reframe. If I were to ever get married again, it would be just a gift. If I were to ever have children again, they are gifts to be enjoyed, but not to define and fulfill me apart from God.
And do you feel like you could also say, if I get married again and I don't, I will not be in lack, or you
Yes.
you could see both sides.
100%. I journaled during that time. If I don't, Lord, I still want to be married.
Sure.
I remember telling him, like, I still want to be married. And if that's not your plan for me, I trust you because I have come to see that you really are trustworthy, that if I listen to you, you will not lead me astray, that there is purpose to my life apart from marriage and motherhood.
And you know what? I can't help but see the connection here, and I'm going to write about this so I can preach it someday or something. But the connection, when you were lamenting, it was, here is all of the negative, right? Mm-hmm. But this is who you are. Dreaming about the future, now I'm being honest about, here are my dreams. Here's God. Here's still the desires of my heart. But, right, the framework is still there, but you are God, and I trust you. I got to figure out an alliteration. There's lament, and I got to come up with this alliteration for something that starts with L. Don't steal that. That's copyrighted Daron Earlewine 2022 on the podcast. But sorry, that was
good.
in my brain.
Good.
But it's right there.
Yeah.
Dreams and pain, but they still come and they pivot on that point of saying, no, but I trust you.
Yeah, it's so true. And
so you started trusting him.
so I started trusting him.
And he started showing up.
Yeah. Real trust. You know, like my whole life I'd said I trusted him.
Yeah.
But until we actually have to trust him with our dreams,
Yes.
are we really actually having to trust him?
Well, it's like saying something like, well, you know what I mean? I hate that. I think it's funny when we forgive people, because they did something an accident. It was an accident, so I forgave him. It's like, wait a second. No, that was an accident. You don't need to forgive somebody for an accident. Like, you don't need forgiveness until you really have to forgive somebody that really screwed up, right?
Yes,
In this
right.
situation, it's like, no, I trust is actually when I'm actually like, wait a second here. I have to trust you because I can't see or that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And at this point, I had no idea what was coming. I just sitting there in that apartment like, okay, Lord, and take 2. Here we go.
Yeah. And that's what? How many months, years? How long was that season?
I lived a little over a year, year and a half in that apartment.
Yeah. And then what happened?
And then a friend of mine was like, hey, are you ready to date yet? And I had literally just put an account on Bumble, so I couldn't say no, I guess.
Right, yeah.
But she said, well, there's this guy I want you to meet, and he lives in Kentucky. I was like, nope. He's divorced? Nope. He's got 2 kids? Nope. And the divorce thing wasn't fair because I was divorced too, and I was just like, no, 3 strikes. And she's like, and he was my high school boyfriend.
So I've got some killer prom pictures you got to see.
Oh, for sure. And I'll be honest, I was like not interested in moving to Kentucky or, and I told her, well, you can, let him say hi online. And I had full intentions of like, hey, nice to meet you. Have a great life.
Shut him down. Yeah.
But he started talking about doing his daughter's ballet buns for dance class. And
I don't know what a ballet bun is.
you know how they put it up on their hair. And
I got 3 boys. I don't know.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm picturing this person doing ballet buns and taking care of this wonky-eyed bird dog that he has. And, just a different kind of man than the one I had been married to the first time. He had a vegetable garden, He was a photographer. Like, he appreciated beauty, all these things.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'll talk to him for a little bit. And lo and behold, he stole my heart. He is so opposite my first husband in so many ways. And so he, I went down and visited in Kentucky a few times, and we had a long distance relationship, and eventually, his girls are down there, and he wanted to be by them, understandably. And so if our relationship was going to continue, I had to move to Eastern Kentucky. And I remember crying to him on the phone, like, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm used to city life here in Indiana.
Yeah.
And, if there was one thing that I had continued to hold on to after all of this, it was my friends and family here who walked me through that season. And so the idea of leaving them was really hard. But I ended up going to Kentucky, and we got married, and the Lord has just continued to refine me living in Eastern Kentucky, compared to living in a city, and
You have boots and like an ATV now and anything?
just about.
That's so judgmental to Eastern Kentucky. I have been there before, but I'm sorry.
They're everywhere.
Okay.
It's
But listen,
fine.
I like boots. I have boots. If I had enough property to have an ATV, I'd have one. I'm not hating on it. I'm just asking questions here.
No. Really loud trucks, lots of really loud trucks. But it's been just very healing.
Are you close to Bristol?
I don't know Bristol.
Oh, that's a NASCAR place. Anyway, I'm a redneck. Sorry. Continue with your story.
Yes. Well, you should come to Moorhead.
Okay.
So we got married, and then so side note, the genetic counselor, I remember, said to us in the appointment, here's the likelihood that you guys would have another child with this genetic disease. Now, if you were to be with somebody else, you're back to the 1 in 70,000 chance like anybody else. And at the time, I was just furious with her for even saying that, so mad. But that little knowledge allowed me to, move forward without fear. And so my husband Guy and I have 2 stepdaughters who are 16 and 13, Allie and Aaron. And we have Mac, who's 3, and Charlie, who's 6 months old.
6 months. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Molly. So you go from no kids, no husband, to I now have 4 children, husband. Mm-hmm. Like,
it's very full. It's a very full life. And, but I am so grateful because I just cherish it all a lot more as a gift, gifts that they are.
Yeah.
And it's been neat to see the redemption because, even my dad got remarried after my mom died, and I had a stepmom, and there was some pain there with that new role in my life for a while. And then God allowed me to become a stepmom. And so there's been some redemption there too. And this isn't heaven though.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
it's still got to clean the house,
Yeah.
got to, discipline children. And so
Marriage is still hard.
Marriage is still hard. It's not the movies.
Yep.
So I always want to remind people, like, it's not like, and they all lived happily ever after, because that's coming.
Yes.
But it has just been really neat to see how God has used all of that pain and redeemed it, and especially taught me about His love for me.
I love it so much, Molly. And a question I would have for you is, I've got a buddy who's going to be actually on one of the episodes in this series, and they almost he had a child that battled leukemia. And I remember one of the lowest points for him, he said, hey, don't send me. Like, if you talk to some dad who's going through this, like, don't send them my way. Because he was like, they don't want to hear my stories. They don't want to hear what I have to say. And he was in that, in the depth, the deepest part of the dark valley there. And we'll share his story in another episode. But was there a point like that for you? And if there was, how do you view the opportunity now to talk or to speak into someone's life who may be experiencing something similar to that you did? Is that something you love doing, or do you see like God bringing more of those people, across your path? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
I'd say with each of those losses, there was a period of time where I was not ready to talk about them. Because each one it's a new kind of wrestling that you're dealing with, and can't breathe when you're wrestling. So yes, with each of those, there was a time where I was like, please don't, send people to me about Lay's disease, because I have nothing good to say about it.
Yeah. And that's important if we have a friend that's going through something, like there's going to be a season, and let's not be that friend, right? That says, hey, could you be the inspirational speaker for this right now?
Right.
Like, no, because I don't have any inspiration for it.
Yes, that's right. But after the seasons of lament and being able to process, our stories are so powerful. And when God has brought us through darkness, which He promises to do, we have got to share that with people, even if it's just one-on-one, But I have been so grateful, because I've seen how this constant thread in my life has, God knew all that was going to happen to me. He knew all the choices that I would make that would lead me to where I am.
Yeah.
And even teaching elementary school for all those years, I'm very comfortable telling my story now, and talking to groups. And so it's been really neat to go around doing some speaking at conferences and retreats and at churches. And I also wrote a book called The Moon is Round.
Love it.
And I have enjoyed just seeing how God has used my story, which is just part of His story, to encourage other people who are hurting, and just help them to hang on a little longer,
Tell me about the title of the book, The Moon is Round.
So the title is The Moon is Round. It's an extraordinary true story of loss, grief, and the fight for faith, because it was a fight at times. But the title comes from Tage's funeral sermon. Our pastor gave this illustration of a young girl who is fighting leukemia. And after she died, her parents found her journals, and they kept seeing the phrase, the moon is round, the moon is round. And eventually, through the course of reading the journals, they realized what she was saying is the moon is round even when I don't see it.
Wow.
It's round even if I actually only can see a crescent.
Wow.
It's still round, no matter what I see.
Let's go.
And
that's so good.
the same is true. Like, God is still good. He's still trustworthy, even when we don't see all of that.
That's so good, Molly. I'm glad I asked the question, because I was like, that's a interesting title. Now I love it. how can people get the book? How can they stay connected with you? Because I know listening to a podcast is one thing, but getting to read a book and underline quotes and do all that. So how can they get the book? How can they stay connected to you, Molly?
Yes. The book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then I am Molly M. Huffman on Instagram or mollyhuffman.com on the internet.
Yes. I love it. Molly, I love the story. I love the journey. I know it's going to inspire and resonate with so many people. Go get the book. Follow her on Insta. Stay connected. And you know, if you have questions, maybe you can obviously send them right to Molly. If you have questions you want us to send her away, please reach out to us. Once again, you always reach out to me. You can text me at 317-550-5070. I'd love to hear from you by text, or you can email me, Daron@blackbirdmission.com. We'd love to stay connected. And Molly, it is stories like yours that just affirm and reaffirm what we tell you guys every single week here on the podcast is God is for you. He's not against you. He's near you. Even in the darkest valley of the shadow of death, He's near you. Not far away, and He's created you on purpose and for a purpose. So, Molly, thanks for sharing that journey with us. Go get the book, and we'll see you guys next time right here on the Daron Earlewine Podcast.